what happened is that we had around a decade plus of swiping apps, and we reached the point where we really burnt out of those because those apps have not been working in the favor of the consumer. And as you said, they're optimized to keep people on the platform. The whole objective of vetting, and for the lack of a better phrase, is we don't want bums in Tova. I think Brian Chesky put it correctly, where it was we went from social networking to social media, and now we're going back to social networking.
Hi everyone. Today we'll be getting into the future of social spaces in the digital startup world with Pranay, the founder of Tova. Pranay, thank you so much for being here.
Super excited, Ria. Glad to be here.
Yeah, I mean, just to kind of get started, for those who don't know, who are you and what do you do?
Yeah, I'm Pranay. I'm the co-founder of a startup called Tova. Tova is a private social club, one of the first few of its kind, especially in Asia. So we started in Hong Kong, expanded to Singapore, and now we're back and forth between the two cities.
Awesome, cool. So, I mean, for those who are unfamiliar with what a social club would look like in an app, can you kind of describe that to us?
Yeah. So actually, our app is just a means to the end. Our objective as a private social club is to help people connect in person, and so our entire value prop is geared around experiences and events and activities where you get to meet new people, come with your friends, and create a way to socialize, which is a lot more easier than just going to a bar and chatting with random strangers. So our when I say private, what I mean is that we have vetted applications. So everybody who comes into the community is either referred or vetted or both. And that's kind of how we curate the crowd. And then the layer of value that we add on top of that is that we curate the social calendar. The app part of it is just to make things move easier and seamlessly. So we have things like group chats, we have hobby-based groups. So there's a bunch of other stuff that goes on in the app. But our prime objective is to help you connect in person.
Yeah. And I'm just curious, when did you get started? Like, how old is Tova?
Tova is coming up to 2 years now. So we launched in 2024, August-ish. That's when we started in Hong Kong. That Hong Kong has really been our testing grounds, our testing bed. And then we kind of had some idea of what we were doing maybe a year after that. And that's when so in October last year is when we expanded to Singapore. So Singapore is much younger, I guess 10 months in now. Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah. I remember talking earlier and you were talking about, the vetting process and how part of that is manual and by hand. So I'm curious, what are the kinds of things that you look for when you're vetting applicants? Like, how does that exactly work?
So vetting, the whole objective of vetting, and for the lack of a better phrase, is we don't want bums in Toba. And so we want people who are doing something with their lives, whether be it their hobbies or work. That's okay. We just want to filter out the bums. And so that, and plus we have this very specific criteria where we only have working professionals in Tova. And so we kind of filter out anybody who's undergrad or lower. So those are the two main objectives of the vetting. And then obviously the underlying is that we're trying to create a like-minded group of people. And so these two really help create that kind of atmosphere, because when you start working, you're in a very different phase of life versus like when you're studying. So that's one. And then we like to keep the crowd more driven and ambitious, and everybody has value to offer to each other. So that's kind of the reason why we do the vetting. And then how we do the vetting is, we have to look for proxies of drive. So that could be we have an application form, and everybody kind of goes through that. You can add a referral, which really helps speed up your application. But we're looking for maybe a project that you're working on that you're super excited about, or the work that you're doing that you're really passionate for. Sometimes the school that you went to helps us. with as we're just looking for proxies for your personality. And so it's basically a little bit of a combination of all of it.
Yeah, that's interesting. So I'm wondering, 2 years ago in 2024, what made you guys start this and what kind of inspired this to come alive?
Yeah. Yeah, so the journey started actually a lot earlier for Tova. I actually did my first startup in university, and that was during COVID, which is also a social startup. And it made sense during university because of COVID, we couldn't really interact with anybody, and so there was a desperate need to find ways to socialize, especially in Hong Kong, where the restrictions were a lot more strict than anywhere else. And so that was the inception of this concept of in-person socializing, at least for me. And it made sense during COVID. It quickly did not make sense after COVID because people started to connect again. And I realized that university actually is the final frontier of your life where you kind of have a structured environment to socialize. So folded that startup down, but that's where I met my co-founder, Athena. So that was good. And then I guess I graduated and I quickly realized that the problem for in-person connection had not disappeared. It was just a lot more apparent when you start working because now you don't really have any kind of structure. You're really left to your team, like at large corporations, and your existing friends from university. But if you wanted to step outside of that circle, it becomes a lot trickier. So I realized the problem is a lot more dire, and Hong Kong being a very transient city of sorts where people are coming and going, there is a lot more need for something like Toba. And so that's what led to the idea being ready in 2024. In fact, before we launched this concept of a private social club, we were actually doing like one-to-one matching with an algorithm. We quickly realized that does not go anywhere. That's impossible to scale. And so we pivoted a little bit. And at this time, I was still working at my corporate job. And we launched around August, and we saw more traction than we anticipated. And then we just decided to take the leap.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's cool. Yeah. So I'm kind of wondering because I think the first wave of social apps was, things like Tinder, stuff like that, which were kind of
Yeah,
more optimized for the users to stay on the app for longer, not really like what you're saying, like in-person connection. I'm
exactly.
curious what your opinion is for like the next wave, like your time
Yeah.
of social apps and what you think is going to happen in the future.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good question. I've been thinking a lot about this space particularly, and I think what happened is that we had around a decade plus of swiping apps, and we reached the point where we really burnt out of those because those apps have not been working in the favor of the consumer. And as you said, they're optimized to keep people on the platform, which leads to frustration. And I don't think I can name any friend of mine, any person I know who hasn't gone through this download the dating app, delete the dating app, download the dating app because there's no other source, and then delete the dating app again because you just get really tired of it. And so I think the world is really reaching for in-person connection, human connection. And I think there's three major catalysts for why it's happening now. One is that we've really burnt out of swiping apps because they've not worked for us. Two is COVID. And I think that it's pretty easy to understand why. And I think the third one is actually AI. I think AI leads us to chat less with humans, talk less with humans. But at the end of the day, we're still social creatures. And so we still need that human connection. So I think as AI incepts deeper into our lives, we're going to look for human connection more and more. So I actually do think that in-person connection will have a wave of its own in parallel with AI's boom, just because you can't have one and not have the other, because we're just not wired that way. So I think those three catalysts are what will push us to be more in-person oriented. In fact, I think it's going to be very tricky for, let's say, something like venture to get into this space because you're not optimizing for metrics that venture would care about. And so it becomes a very tricky space. Like it becomes tricky to be investable if you really go into this direction, especially the venture type of scale that we're talking about. And so I think it's going to be a tricky time for consumer social. Um, I mean, there are a lot of people who are trying ideas like Be Real, but I mean, that story kind of collapsed in of itself, right? And it's because uh, it's hard to monetize when you're optimizing for you know de reducing your social interaction. So I think Brian Chesky put it correctly, where it was we went from social networking to social media, and now we're going back to social networking. And I think there'll be a discovery phase of like what is actually working, but we're definitely going back to connecting with humans again.
Yeah. I mean, that's an interesting challenge. Like, how do you make yourself good in the eyes of like your VCs and stuff like that? But at the same time, I do see people using these apps long term. Like, I could see people using Tova long term, maybe. At any point in your life, you could expand your circle. But like,
Yeah.
at the same time, I do see what you're saying. Aside from that, did you face any other challenges or interesting points during building Tova that you didn't really expect at first?
For sure. So I think Tova kind of is unique in of itself and its business model. I think we really struggled to find people we could copy from, just because the general meetup.com type of communities exist, and the private member club world exists. But we were trying to play in this new in between where we were catering to a lot of people and giving community to a lot of people, but we were still private. And so our real challenge, and it still continues to be a tricky part, is to figure out the best business model, because we really have no playbook to copy. So what I mean specifically is that with communities, you can just really blow up the community and you can start taking commissions on ticket sales, and that's okay. With private member clubs, you charge a membership fee, and those membership fees are pretty heavy, and so that allows you to keep your revenue up while keeping your consumer base small. Now we want to play in this in between space where we want to keep the community slightly tighter, but we still can't blanket charge everyone a flat fee. I say that because the membership clubs are charging a flat fee and people are willing to pay it because they come with a physical infrastructure. They come with a building where you can just enjoy your facilities without needing an event or another activation by them, and you're still quite okay with it. But with Tova, the main value prop that we drive is through our events and experiences. So what ends up happening is that in a month, maybe we end up doing maybe 20 events a month. And maybe you as a user are interested in maybe three of them. But it just so happens that you are not free on those 3 days. And so in totality, you've basically received no value from Tova, even though you wanted to. And so that ends up being this friction point between the member and Tova, because like they're willing to pay the membership fees, but they can't attend the events. And so then it's like, it doesn't work. And then we don't have any physical infrastructure where they can just come in and enjoy it themselves and not have to worry about anything else. So we've basically landed ourselves in this middle space where it becomes a lot trickier to figure out the business model. And so we've had multiple iterations of the business model where we went from we started with freemium, then we went into membership fees only, so it was paid only, and we're back to freemium. And I think we've learned something in every stage, and we're back to freemium for the right reasons, because now we're seeing growth increasing as well, and we have people switching to like the premium membership tier. So we think this is what is working, but I believe this solution should be to still be nimble and be ready to pivot if we get new signals.
Yeah. No, yeah, it's interesting to hear what pivoting means in like the social app world because it's just so
Yeah,
different. Yeah. I guess as
for
my
sure.
last question, I wanted to ask if you have any advice to people out there who are listening who are planning on trying to start a social app themselves or a community-based app themselves.
Um, I think community-based apps, you'd set yourself up for success by doing it. You may not necessarily need to do it as a full-time business, but I think you should definitely take a stab at just running a community on the side. I think it comes with a lot of value outside of like the money. I think the value that you deliver to people, and then inadvertently to yourself is just the networking that you get. And it's not like a transactional business networking type of thing. It's just very organic and fun. And you genuinely meet a lot of great people. So I think you should 100% give a swing, and it may not have to be like a full time commitment of yours. I think the second thing I'd say is pick a niche. I think Tova is the opposite of that. Tova's value prop is that you get to meet people from like different walks of lives. But I think there's pros and cons of that. I think the pros are, yes, you get to meet different people, but then the challenge is you are not able to attract a like individually, you're not able to pinpoint why you're coming except the social aspect. So, for example, if I created a group for marketeers, then I know the value that I'm getting as a marketeer if I'm joining, and it's very easy for me to pitch this value prop to any other person. And so, I think going niche is definitely something I'd recommend, especially if you're doing it on the side, and hopefully it's a niche that you're familiar with. But I think everybody should look into community spaces, community businesses. I think this will have a massive, massive wave, and we're already seeing that all over the world right now, and rightly so. So I think you should give it a spin. You don't have to necessarily do it full time, and I would recommend you try a niche as opposed to going just a wide net.
Yeah, that's awesome. So whoever's out there listening to that, hopefully they try it out for themselves and see how it goes. But yeah, thank you so much,
Yeah,
Pranay, for being here. This was interesting
for
hearing
sure.
about, the world of social apps and how social media is going to evolve over the next few years, hopefully. Yeah, thank you
Yeah,
so
of
much for being here.
course. Thanks for you. I appreciate it.